The pain started 6 months ago, sharp and relentless. And the day I got the diagnosis, the one that required expensive, long-term treatment, was the same day my family decided I was a liability. My father, a man who built his empire on healthcare, didn't offer a discount. He didn't offer comfort. He offered a cold, calculated business proposition. He said, "Alex, your health issues are unfortunate, but you need liquidity. Sign over your half of the family cabin, and we'll give you $50,000. It's a generous settlement." $50,000 for a decade of treatment that would cost 10 times that? I looked at my brother, David, the golden boy, who stood beside him, nodding in agreement. David, who was about to open his sprawling new high-tech clinic, built on prime commercial land that once belonged to our grandfather. I refused to sign. I knew the cabin, nestled on a worthless half-acre of scrubland, was all I had left of my mother's family. But what I didn't know was that this seemingly worthless half-acre was the single greatest asset our family had ever owned. They assumed I was just a sick, desperate woman clinging to sentiment. They didn't realize that their new multi-million-dollar clinic, the one my brother was so proud of, was built entirely on a patch of land that technically, legally, still belonged to me. This is the story of how a critical illness brought me to the brink of financial ruin and how the smallest piece of inheritance exposed the biggest lie my family had ever told. My name is Alex. I'm 37, and I was, until recently, a rising star in real estate development, independent of my family's healthcare empire, Thorne Health Group. My father, Arthur Thorne, is a titan in medical infrastructure. My brother, David, is his heir, the physician, the public face, always calm, always respected. I was the black sheep, the one who left the family business to build my own legacy. I never needed their money, and I never asked for it. That independence, I realize now, was the first thing they resented. Our family fortune started with my grandfather, a simple country doctor. When he died, he left two things: Thorne Health Group to my father, and a small, remote, half-acre property in the mountains to his two grandchildren, David and me. This half-acre held a dilapidated old fishing cabin where my mother spent her childhood. It was a sentimental asset, nothing more. For 20 years, David and I jointly held the deed to that half-acre. It was understood that neither of us could sell it without the other's signature. I didn't care about the land. I cared about the memory of my mother there. The real trouble started a year ago when David began building his new flagship clinic, David Thorne Medical, a sprawling facility meant to be his launchpad into the family hierarchy. He built it quickly, aggressively, on a plot of land that once was a vacant, overgrown industrial park. Then came my diagnosis, an autoimmune disorder requiring specialized chemotherapy and maintenance for the rest of my life. My own insurance, ironically, didn't cover half of it. I was drowning in bills and my business was suffering. I finally reached out to my family, humbled and sick. My father called me in. David sat with him. The atmosphere wasn't familial. It was clinical. "Alex," my father said, leaning back in his chair, "we want to help, but the family resources are tied up in the business expansion. The best thing you can do for yourself is liquidate. We'll buy your half of the cabin property for $50,000. It's an eyesore, but it's yours. Take the money and manage." $50,000? That was an insult. It was a deliberate attempt to cut me loose and silence any future claims. And it was all tied to that one small piece of inherited land. I walked out of that office and vowed not to become a liability they could simply discard. The calls started immediately. David first. He was condescending and cold. "Alex, be reasonable. I need you to sign the quitclaim deed. You need the money, and Dad needs that property clear for tax purposes. Why are you dragging your feet? You're being emotional." They cut off my access to the small legacy trust my grandfather had set up for education. They made it clear I was on my own. I was weak, sick, and running out of savings. I knew they were just waiting for me to break. I decided to fight, not for the $50,000, but for my dignity. I hired the cheapest real estate lawyer I could find, Mr. Jenkins, an ancient man who worked out of a cluttered office above a deli. I showed him the deed to the half-acre. It simply listed Alex Thorne and David Thorne, joint tenants, with the old parcel number. I said, "Mr. Jenkins," my voice thin from the pain medication, "can they legally force me to sell my half of this property?" He put on his reading glasses, studied the deed, and shook his head. No, not without a lawsuit to force a sale, and that takes time. But why do they want this old junk land so badly? The $50,000 is barely a down payment on a decent car. I told him it's about control and making me feel small. I had exhausted my own funds on initial chemo rounds. I took the $50,000 they offered me, not as a settlement, but as a retainer for a full legal investigation. I signed the quitclaim deed for the cabin property, accepting the money on the condition that my half-acre be surveyed again immediately before the transfer. It was a technicality they didn't care about. Mr. Jenkins was a man who believed in the letter of the law. He sent a survey team out to the scrubland. The old cabin was exactly where it should be. But when he got the new survey results back, he called me in a panic. "Alex," he whispered into the phone, "you need to come down here, right now. You won't believe this." I drove to his dusty office. He spread the new blueprints on the desk. "Look at the old deed," he pointed. "It lists a specific parcel number, but the description is generic. Half-acre on the north slope. Your grandfather never defined the exact boundaries." "So?" I asked, confused. "So, when 20 years ago, when your father consolidated the family landholdings, he used the original, outdated survey that only noted the worthless scrubland. But when David began building the new medical facility last year, he had to secure financing and clear the title. He used the old deed to transfer the scrubland, the land with the cabin, to the Thorne Health Group. I didn't understand why this mattered. He transferred the half-acre to himself, so what? He tapped the new survey with his pen. "Look where the new half-acre legally sits based on your grandfather's original vague description of North Slope. It was never tied to the cabin, just to the acreage." He drew a circle on the industrial park map. My stomach dropped. "Alex," he said, his voice slow and heavy, "the half-acre that legally belonged to you and David, and which David thought he had quietly secured, is located dead center of the new Thorne Medical Campus." I stared at the map. The lines didn't lie. The $80 million gleaming David's Thorne Medical Clinic was built on prime commercial land, and the new state-of-the-art emergency annex and heliport was sitting right on my legally defined half-acre. I was staggered. The scrubland was the decoy. The true inheritance was the strategically located, commercially vital half-acre next to the old industrial park. And my father and brother knew it. They had relied on me never having the means or the motivation to survey the land properly. They had gambled on my trust and my illness. I now held the power to stop my brother's entire medical operation. The heliport, the emergency annex, the two most critical parts of the new facility were on land that was never fully cleared. I had signed the quitclaim deed for the old cabin property. David had my signature. They thought they were safe. I called Mr. Jenkins back, but I signed the deed. Did I give up my claim? He smiled, a dry, triumphant smile. "That's the beauty of it, Alex. You signed the deed for the cabin property, which has a specific parcel ID. But your claim is on a half-acre defined only by its legal description, not its old name. The parcel David built on has a completely different ID. You still own half of that half-acre, and they are in a catastrophic breach of title." I felt a surge of strength that chemotherapy couldn't touch. The diagnosis had made me weak. Their betrayal made me lethal. My fate was now intertwined with the fate of their empire.
The next day, David Thorne Medical was preparing for its grand opening gala. My brother was doing interviews, talking about his vision for healthcare. I instructed Mr. Jenkins to serve two people, my father and David. The documents were a cease and desist order and a notice of litigation, delivered by a uniformed courier right to the new clinic's lobby. I waited for the phone call. It came within 5 minutes. My father's voice was unrecognizable, not cooled, but frantic. "Alex, what is the meaning of this? You signed the papers. We paid you $50,000. "You paid me $50,000 for the scrubland, Dad," I said, my voice calm, professional, and completely devoid of emotion. "The scrubland is clear. The heliport is not." There was silence. Then David's voice, shaking with rage. "You surveyed it. You went behind us. You have no claim. The land was consolidated years ago." "The land was fraudulently consolidated, David," I countered. "You needed my signature to clear the title on the emergency annex parcel, a signature you conveniently skipped. You're in breach of every financial covenant you signed for that construction loan. I'm stopping the opening tomorrow." They called an immediate private family meeting at the old corporate headquarters. No lawyers allowed. They wanted to negotiate the truth away. My father and brother were already seated when I walked in. They looked defeated. My father spoke, his voice low. "Alex, you're sick. You're emotional. We'll give you $1 million. Drop the claim. Think about the family name." $1 million? I repeated. "Your entire facility is leveraged on that land. The emergency annex alone is worth $20 million a year in revenue. The cost of stopping the grand opening and getting an injunction on the heliport will bankrupt the construction lender. The land is worth at least $50 million to you, Dad. And I own half of it." David slammed his fist on the table. "This is blackmail. We were trying to protect the family from your medical expenses. We knew you'd bleed the money dry." "You were trying to steal my inheritance to fund your ambition, David. And what about the family name, Dad? What do I tell the press when they find out the head of Thorne Health Group knowingly built a critical care facility on contested land? That's medical negligence and financial fraud." My father put his head in his hands. "Your mother," he whispered, "she would be ashamed of you." I felt the last thread of family loyalty snap. My mother wouldn't be ashamed of me. She'd be ashamed of you. She tried to protect me from this exact moment. She died knowing you would prioritize the business over your own daughter's health. You made me desperate, Dad. You made me fight. C. The ultimate demand. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, the final demand. I didn't want money. Money was temporary. I wanted control and security. I slid the paper across the table. "Here is my counteroffer. You will not buy me out. You will not stop the lawsuit. You will agree to these 3 conditions. 1. You will immediately establish a fully funded, irrevocable medical endowment in my name for $10 million, managed by a third-party foundation." They looked shocked. 2, I continued, my voice gaining power. "You will transfer the remaining half of the emergency annex parcel deed into my name. I will then immediately sell it back to David Thorne Medical for a nominal fee. This transaction will fully clear the title and remove the risk of injunction." David finally spoke, a strangled sound. "And the third?" I looked at my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "The third is for you, Dad. When I got sick, you saw a weakness to exploit. That is not how a healthcare company should operate. The family foundation is currently the largest shareholder in Thorne Health Group. You will immediately resign from the board of directors. I will be appointed to the vacant seat, and I will be using my position to ensure the Thorne name is never used for greed again." They stared at the document. It was complete surrender. The alternative was a public, catastrophic failure. My father signed first. David signed next, his hand shaking. I had won everything, and all it took was a little bit of inheritance and a whole lot of calculated rage. The grand opening went ahead exactly as planned. David Thorne Medical is a massive success. But now, David has a new, very expensive, very permanent silent partner, me. I immediately transferred the $10 million into the medical endowment. That money guarantees my care for life, independently of the Thorne Health Group. I no longer worry about getting sick. I worry about holding my family accountable. I sit on the board of directors now. I don't interfere in David's clinical work. He is a good doctor. But I oversee every financial decision, every expansion plan, and every ethical breach. He knows that if he slips, I will pull the plug. He finally respects me because I proved I was more powerful than he was. My father is still retired, but he's quiet now. He never calls to talk about the business, only to ask about my health, which is a massive change. I believe he is finally learning the difference between personal loyalty and professional control. The half-acre of scrubland they thought was my inheritance, it was just a decoy. The real gift from my grandfather was the legal ambiguity in the deed, which my mother had always known was the family's ultimate failsafe. She taught me that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the details everyone else overlooks. That small, ignored corner of your life, that obscure piece of paper, that is where the real power lies. My family thought they could buy my silence for $50,000, but I used my inheritance to buy my freedom, my health, and a seat at the table. And sometimes the only way to heal yourself is to expose the disease at the very heart of your family. But even with my seat on the board, the war wasn't over. David wasn't content to simply work under my shadow. He was already planning his next move, a proxy fight using my past medical history to declare me unfit to serve. And I had to prepare to fight my brother all over again.
Please
15
like
years
and
to the day
subscribe to
since
my
the
YouTube
fire.
channel.
I drove back down Pine Hollow Road. The old Turner sign still leaned in the ditch, half charred, half standing. I left it that way. A reminder that surviving's sometimes prettier than perfect. Rick Calloway's mansion sat where corn once swayed. Half the windows dark. His company had folded, investors gone, name rusting on a real estate sign. I parked anyway. Knocked once. He opened the door slower than I expected. No more tailored suits. Just a man with age in his eyes and a cane that looked heavier than pride. "Eli Turner," he said. "Didn't think you'd come back." I never really left. Just took the long way around. He invited me in. The kitchen smelled of black coffee and old wood. We sat where the marble met the memories. "So," he muttered, "you buying me out?" I slid a folder across the table. "Already did, years ago. But I came for something else." He blinked, waiting for gloating. I poured 2 cups instead. My father used to say land don't keep grudges. People do. I'm done with that. We talked an hour about weather, drought, the town's future. Somewhere between the second cup and the silence, I saw what was left of the man who'd once burned everything we loved. Tired, hollow, human. When I stood to leave, he asked, "Why didn't you destroy me?" I smiled. "Because, Rick, you already did that yourself." Outside, the clouds broke. The ridge glowed gold again. I stopped at Dad's grave on the way out, laid 1 ear of corn in the grass, first crop from the new fields. "We made it back, Pop, and the soil remembers." Funny thing about ashes, people think they mean endings, but if you wait long enough, they make the richest ground of all.
Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.